Joining me now is Josh Maples. He's an agricultural economist with MSU's Extension Service. Josh, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Scott. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I got to be honest to you and upfront with you on this. When Alex Batten, one of the producers here at SuperTalk Mississippi, shared the story with me, I thought, well, this is interesting, but I don't know anything at all about cattle, agriculture, and certainly not screwworms. But this is potentially a big story that could affect Mississippi's cattle industry, even though these things have been detected, and I know MSU is doing a lot of research on this. They're still about, 700 miles from the U.S. border, but that, as we've seen with viruses and bacteria, it doesn't mean anything. It could be here tomorrow if it wanted.
Yeah, this is potentially a really big deal. Cattle production in Mississippi and across the southern U.S. and all of U.S. honestly is huge. You know, we've got well 500,000 cattle or more that's here in Mississippi, and there's way more than that in Texas, which is the primary kind of concern area right now. And the screwworm could potentially really wreak some havoc on our production systems if it makes its way to the U.S.
All right, so let's start with the basics. Talk to me like I'm in fifth grade. What is exactly is the screwworm, and how does it affect the cattle?
Sure. So a screwworm, the easiest way to think about it, it looks a whole lot like a house fly. So really similar to the flies that you have flying around your house right now, probably about that size. It it, it attaches or it finds living tissue. So this particular fly or screwworm fly likes to feed on living tissue. So it looks for open wounds or areas in which it could find living tissue on animals to attach itself. And then it lays its eggs there. And as the eggs grow, those larvae are actually what causes a lot of the damage to the animals as they're eating that living tissue. And it can cause, significant damage to those animals. And if not caught and treated really quickly, it can even cause death. In those animals. And this is, Scott, I should mention, this is not a new thing to the United States. We've dealt with this. We eradicated screwworms out of the U.S. in the 50s and 60s. It was a decades-long eradication program to push these screwworm flies back south, all the way back through Panama. And we've been trying to keep a barrier there in Panama for the past 60, 70 years to keep screwworms out of the U.S. The concern now is they've broken through that barrier and they're moving northward.
How did we eradicate the screwworm in the 50s and 60s? What was the methodology?
It's a fascinating methodology of producing sterile male flies. So the female flies, of course, are the ones that lay the eggs on the animals. They mate one time and then they die. And so the strategy is we produce and have been producing, there's a big facility in Panama, hundreds of millions of sterile male screwworm flies. And by sterile, I just mean they can still breed with the female flies, but nothing's going to happen. And so then literally dump them out of airplanes over areas where there's known to be flies.
I've actually seen this. I didn't realize this was the same story, but I remember seeing something about this and being fascinated by it a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
We carpet bomb other countries with sterile flies.
That's the strategy here. We did that here in the U.S. to get them pushed out of the U.S. in the 50s and 60s. We pushed them out of kind of the deep South, Mississippi, in the 50s. It pushed into the 60s to be able to push them all the way out of Texas. They came back in a little bit in the 70s. We had to push them out again. But then we continue to do that down south. We did it over Mexico, and then over the country south there. And so the goal is to get it down to the smallest geographical area, which is Panama. And there you don't have a very big area in which you have to blanket with these sterile flies. But as they move north, of course, it gets wider and you've got more area and it's more costly, way more significant undertaking to try to eradicate these things from a much larger geographical area.
Josh Maples is an agricultural economist at MSU's Extension Service. I'm told calf prices are already at record highs now due to tight supplies. So with the USDA suspending cattle imports from Mexico about a month and a half ago due to the screwworms, it impacts our state's feeder cattle supply, and that's going to drive prices even higher.
That's right. And especially in the southern part of the United States, we bring in about, last year we brought in a little over 1.2 million head of feeder cattle. So these are cattle that are going into feedlots in the U.S., brought them in from Mexico. So that helps support supplies, especially those southern feedlots. And so we've got already record tight supplies of cattle that we're producing here in the United States. And then you to take this into account, we're bringing in fewer from Mexico. That is certainly boosting prices right now. So short-term effects, Scott, it's stronger prices for our cattle producers. But I certainly don't want that to sound like a long-term good thing because we're concerned about the screwworm coming to the United States. And if it does, then we've got much bigger problems than what impact the screwworm blocking imports from Mexico is having on prices.
So, as far as prices are concerned, I've seen that an outbreak of the screwworm in Texas could cost about $1.8 billion. Is there a dollar amount that could impact Mississippi's cattle industry if it were to spread even north of Texas?
Yeah, there's not a specific dollar amount that we've estimated. We are working on some of that. The key here is it's going to change production practices in the sense of you've really got to be able to treat those animals really quickly. And so, cattle producers, have to be looking at their cattle nearly every single day if they're in an area where there's screwworm concerns, and you got to be watching them really closely. So it's a really hands-on, intensive, and you've got to have the facilities to be able to treat them if you do notice something. So it's a really impactful in terms of time and effort and cost to do this. And that's not even to mention the change in production practices. So things like dehorning or castration, key things that are done in the cattle industry to support production, would all of a sudden come with significantly more risk because then you're worried about those screwworms attaching to those open wound areas. And so, yes, big time potential impacts here if it's something that gets here. Hopefully, we are able to keep it from entering the United States.
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, time is really of the essence. If it were to spread and the area is already affected by the screwworms, it can kill cattle in 10 days if left untreated. And one of the concerns I would have in Mississippi, and I saw this number and I found this fascinating. Today, there are only about 5 cowboys per ranch compared to 50 cowboys historically. So that makes it a challenge for these ranches to manage operations and monitor for potential screwworms.
Absolutely. The ag sector is no different than a lot of other sectors in terms of labor is a big challenge. And, we've got fewer producers producing more with less people. And so that's what we're seeing. Something like screwworms, though, is really intensive. It is something that would take a lot of time and effort to be able to treat. And Scott, I'll give you one other quick stat on that. In Mississippi, the average herd size is about 35 head of cattle. So not, we have a lot of smaller producers, and they may not be out there looking at their cows every single day or twice a day. And they may also not have the facilities to be able to treat their animals, even if they are able to identify, something that needs treated and doing it quickly. They may need to take them to town, take them to a vet, do something like that. All of these things are additional challenges for responding to something like screwworms if we have to deal with it again.
This is. I got to be honest. It's more fascinating of a story than I expected it to be, Josh. I wasn't. I'm captivated by this story now because I know that agriculture is such a big economic driver in the state. 8.3 billion or so a couple of years ago, I believe, driven mainly by chickens, by poultry, by soybeans. But it's a major part of the state's economy that could be impacted if these screwworms continue to advance. Josh, I appreciate your time and getting into this and really enlightening me.
Absolutely, Scott. This is something we're working on here at Mississippi State, especially with the Extension Service, and we're going to try to keep folks as informed and help as much as we can with this.
Hail State. Thanks, Josh.
Hail State.
Scott Sands in for Gerard Gibbert in the Element Wealth Studios on SuperTalk Mississippi and streaming everywhere at supertalk.fm.